lets you know something is happening. Well, it's good to know there's a time when you can stop. Right? Now I see I've got some brothers. Got some brothers? Okay. And I know we got some sisters over here. Right? Well now, brothers and sisters always get along, right? Because we got some other brothers and sisters around here too, right? Brothers and sisters always get along. They never have any problems with each other, do they? No. I'm crossing my fingers when I say that, right? Yes, so there's problems that we have between brothers and sisters, sometimes between friends. And wouldn't it be good if, in a sense, somebody would blow a whistle and say, stop it. Okay? Stop it. Because what's important is the relationship that we have with one another and not what we're arguing about at the time. And in a sense, Jesus is going to tell us as we read through the gospel today that what is important is the relationship. And sometimes we need to say, I'm sorry, and help to build that relationship or bring that relationship back together. So where one time we were kind of at odds, if we can simply say, I'm sorry, then it gives us a chance to make that relationship back again the way it was supposed to be. And that's what we all hope will happen, because we know that Jesus did that for us and God. Now we'll go to the gospel. After I say a word of welcome, we're being taped today, and so we want to welcome the people that are watching this broadcast. We're at Zion Moulton, and part of the Tri-County Cooperative Ministry, which includes Zion, as well as Evangelical Whitting, Faith in Weimar, St. Peter in West Point, and Zion in Sublime. We're very happy to have you part of our worship. So the gospel today is from the 18th chapter of St. Matthew. Jesus said to the disciples, if another member of the church sins against you, go and point out the fault when two of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take one or two others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. I read that in the 1600s, a French explorer by the name of Samuel de Champlain, in his travels around, spent some time in Canada. And he reported back to the old world what was going on in the new. And in Nova Scotia, there was a community of mixed people. There was Catholics and Huguenots, which were the Protestants. And they were served by both the priest as well as the Protestant minister. Champlain wrote how these men often settled their doctrinal differences. Evidently, regularly, the priest and the pastor would have public fist fights. And according to Champlain, crowds would come and watch. You know, there would be Native Americans, there were trappers that were out in the area, as well as the people who lived there, and anyone else passing by that time. They would always come out to watch. It's kind of interesting, because have you noticed that whenever 2 or 3 people are gathered together, often there's a conflict? It's a funny thing about that, isn't it? Somebody eventually is going to be unhappy about something. And it's true in religion, it's true in business, it's true in politics, especially in politics. There's an old story about an ABC chief White House correspondent whose name was Sam Donaldson. Now, evidently, he was one of the more controversial reporters, and he treated presidents of both parties with equal disrespect. He especially picked on Jimmy Carter. Now, Donaldson tells about traveling with Carter one time during the energy crisis, and they went to India. And in India and some of the other developing countries, they were doing an interesting experiment, and I remember reading about this. They would take containers So the gas was used for stoves, for cooking food. It could be used for creating light. It could be used for any number of things that gas could be used for. And so they were exploring these things and looking at them. And Donaldson said to President Carter at the time, "If I fell in this vat, you'd pull me out, wouldn't you?" And Carter said, "Sure, after a suitable interval." Well, where there are people, there are conflicts. It's like a young pastor arrived at a new parish and an older couple invited him to come to dinner. And while the wife was finishing up the details, the husband and the pastor were talking, and eventually the conversation got to the church and the history of the church. And the man pointed out about the fact that there was a big fight in the church about where the piano should go. Should it go to the left side of the pulpit or to the right side of the pulpit? And as the conversation went on about it, the pastor finally asked, "Well, which side were you on?" To which the man said, "Ma, do you remember which side of the pulpit we were on when it came to that controversy?" You know, who remembers? Well, I noticed that you get around it by making everything white, so you don't have to worry about colors, right? That's the best way not to fight about things like that, because often in the church, it's the little things that get fought over. The big things like homosexuality or ordination of certain people or civil rights or things like that, we will have fights about them, but it's often the little things that become interesting. Conflicts simply happen. And the problem is that unresolved conflicts can cause a lot of pain. It can lead to other problems. People have lost jobs, people have lost their children, people have lost their spouses because they couldn't resolve the conflict that was existence. And sometimes the whole outlook on life becomes changed because of an argument. One writer tells a story about a man who had in the front yard a big sign that he even lighted at night, as well as a pile of aluminum. And the sign said, "The Alcoa aluminum with a 30-year guarantee is no good." He was so angry, he put that sign up. Now, at the same time, his grass was immaculate, his garden was perfect, the paint on his house was as clean and pristine as you could make it. But all that was spoiled by the sign in the middle of the yard about aluminum. Keeping his grudge was more important than all the other work that he was doing. And isn't it sad? But that's the trouble with unresolved conflict. It can cause a lot of pain. Pain at work, pain in the church, pain in spoiled relationships, pain that can rob us even of peace of mind. One smart commentator once said, "There are two sides to every argument, and usually they're married to each other." And sometimes these arguments can be unresolved, and then comes the pain. So is it any wonder why Jesus gave us a way to resolve conflicts? And what he says simply is, take the initiative. Notice in the text for today, Jesus did not say, if you and your friends disagree on something. Instead he said, if your brother sins against you. In this instance, we are the injured party. Our friend has lied about us, maybe, or he's taken advantage of us, and we huff and we puff, and finally we say, hold on here. Now he's the one that's done something against me. Why should I go to him? He started it. Let him come to me. Sometimes the greatest enemy in a conflict is pride. Sooner or later, we're going to have to ask what's more important, winning the battle or keeping the relationship. And that question is very important, especially in family relationships. Are we more interested in being right, or are we more concerned about keeping and improving the relationship? A writer tells about a young Indian couple that is from India, Vijay and Martha. They were married through an arrangement by their parents. Vijay's parents considered all the young girls in their social circle and decided on Martha was the one that their son should marry. Now Vijay was 15 at the time and Martha was 13. The two teenagers met only once, but BJ's parents reached a decision with Martha's parents, and they agreed on a wedding date 8 years from now. After all the arrangements had been made, then the parents informed the teenagers that they would be marrying each other in 8 years. During those 8 years, BJ and Martha were permitted to exchange one letter per month. They saw each other twice in 8 years, in an obviously closely chaperoned time. Yet, when they were married, they obviously were married as literally total strangers. In fact, the writer of this story tells about the fact that missionaries who live in such societies report that often arranged marriages have more stability and a much lower divorce rate than marriages that are based on romantic love. Another writer commenting on this marriage noted that in the U.S. and other Western-style cultures, people tend to marry because they're attracted to one another by things like, their smile, or maybe a nice figure, or their athletic ability, or maybe their cheerful disposition, or perhaps just their charm. But he pointed out that over time, these things often change. We know that we change physically over time, and meanwhile, surprises turn up in our personalities, maybe like sloppiness, simply leaving things around, or a tendency towards depression, or even disagreements over sex. In contrast, partners in an arranged marriage do not center their relationship on mutual attraction, but rather, he points out, you've been given the decision, and you need now to base your marriage not on who you're going to marry, but on how you're going to work out this marriage. And therefore, when conflicts come up, the question is not who is right, the question is what's best for our relationship. So if your primary concern is relationship, you don't mind being the person who takes the first step looking for reconciliation. And moving away from that, you see that it's not only true for marriage, but in the church, as well as the workplace, or with your neighbors, or wherever relationships really matter. Jesus is simply saying, take the initiative. If your brother sins against you, go and show him his fault just between the two of you, and if he listens to you, you will have won your brother over. It sounds simple. Take the initiative. But now I'm going to ask you, can you think about somebody with whom you have a strained relationship right now? Maybe somebody in your family, maybe somebody at work, it may even be somebody here in the church. Why not take the initiative to resolve that strained relationship this week? Look beyond the pride that you might be feeling. Even look beyond the immediate problem. Look at the person with whom the relationship is strained. And imagine what it would be like if that relationship were literally healed. How would it be? And if so, take the initiative. A long time ago, there was a story in the Reader's Digest about a town in Minnesota that got its name in a very strange way. It was an area that people just simply began to move to. And as it grew and people started gathering more, they decided they needed a name for this gathering, this village. And so they decided to have a town meeting to make the decision of what they were going to call it. Well, as you can imagine, everybody had a different opinion as to what the name of the town should be. And pretty soon it became a heated argument. So much so that people were shouting at one another. And finally one person stood up, pounded on the pulpit, and he said, "Let's have harmony." Somebody grabbed the idea, and so there is a Harmony, Minnesota on the map right now. Now, harmony is something that's great to have in a community, in a family, in a church. But if harmony is going to happen, somebody's got to take the initiative. Let us pray. Jesus, sometimes your words are hard to live by, but we ask you to help us to hear them, and in this case, to have the courage to take the initiative to heal relationships that we see as broken. After all, that's why you came, to heal our relationship with God. We pray it in your name.